So we'll get started anyway. We're just going to have a quick recap of these. We've looked at 3 arguments so far, and I'm going to talk about the critiques of them as well. So the first one is the Kalam argument, right? And we say, you know, we're here now because of all the past temporal events. Had to start somewhere. That cause was God. That's what Kalam argument said. Now, what I thought was interesting is when we talked about it in class, you guys didn't go after the argument so much. You went after the definition of God, and so that was some of your critiques. It's like, what does omnipotence mean? Can't be omnipotence because there's a contradiction there. So we went after properties of God rather than the argument as such. And that is a valid critique of the existence of God, is what are the properties God has. If they're contradictory, there's, that being can't exist. So we'll leave that aside for now, and I want to focus particularly on the argument. We're saying, does the argument work with this definition of God? And we'll assume that we're happy with the definition of God. So Kalam, all the way back in time, and what was some of the problems we sort of come up with on Monday? Today's Wednesday. There was one I can think of in particular.
Wasn't it, if the universe was created when time started, what was before that?
Yep. So sort of that idea of eternal. I think the one I'm thinking of in particular is about how do we know there hasn't been an infinite number of big bangs before? Okay, so the Kalam argument assumes, so get comfy and stay there. The Kalam argument assumes that the universe has a finite past. Okay, whereas it could very well be just going on forever, as some people claim. We might think that seems a bit absurd, and there are philosophers that debate actual infinities, can they exist, and so forth. But we're going to leave it at that. That's the debate there. Then there's the contingency argument, which says the universe is contingent. It could not have existed. It's easy to imagine nothing. It's easy to imagine things being different. Because we can conceive of things being different, the universe is contingent. Its universe depends on the events, the things that have taken place. And because it's contingent, its whole existence is dependent on something else. So the argument from contingency says, why is there something rather than nothing? God. Okay, that's the argument it takes. And I didn't offer any critiques I'm aware of. I know quite a few, but has anyone thought of some possible problems with that? So the first one is that it assumes the universe is contingent. All right, because we say we can easily conceive of the universe not existing. We can easily conceive of me wearing a different shirt today, but that's not the event that took place. So we don't have justification for saying it could have been different. Maybe it couldn't have been. Maybe this had to be the exact outcome. All right, so that's the first one. And then the second one is from David Hume, who's a Scottish philosopher, and he says, we're committing the fallacy of parts to wholes. All right, and that fallacy says just because something pertains to the parts doesn't mean it pertains to the wholes. So here's a great example of that is the Brooklyn Bridge is made of atoms, right? That's what it's composed of. It's made of atoms. Atoms are invisible. You can't see atoms. What's the conclusion that follows? The Brooklyn Bridge is invisible. Okay, absurd conclusion. Why? Because even though it's a valid argument, has proper structure, and both premises are true, so the conclusion is necessarily true. The problem is we've committed the informal fallacy of parts to wholes. We've said what pertains to the parts pertains to the wholes. Hume says just because everything we're surrounded by has a sufficient reason for its existence doesn't mean the universe does. Okay? So that's a pretty good critique. It's difficult to conceive of something not having a sufficient reason, but we're saying everything we're surrounded by, we're not surrounded by universes. There's only one of them. How can we assume that things we're surrounded by, the universe has the same properties as the things we're surrounded by? So they're sort of the 2 critiques of contingency. And then lastly, motion. So that's the argument that Father Oleg presented to us. So it says if you have a bowl, I'm going to add a couple of layers here, a hockey stick, and a hand. Okay, solid artwork, right? The bowl has the potential to exist in this location, right? Has the potential to move. For that actuality to occur, for the ball to exist at this point, it needs to change location, it needs to move. And so Aquinas says, for change to occur, it is the movement from actuality to potentiality. Okay? It's the movement from the way it is to the way it can be. All right, so for the ball to move there, it needs something to actualize it, right? And so Aquinas says, okay, the ball is actualized by the stick. For the stick to move, it needs something to actualize it. It's actualized by the hand, the elbow. Aquinas says it doesn't matter how many layers you add to this. For change to occur at any instant, it must result in something that is purely actual. All right? Because we're just considering an instant of time. All right? We're not considering over a temporal period like the Kalam argument. We're saying for the ball to move, it needs something to actualize it. For the stick to move, it needs something to actualize it. Doesn't matter how many layers there are in this causal chain. If there is something that has potential, it must be actualized by something. So the only way change can occur is if there is something that's purely actual. What does it mean to be purely actual? It has no potentialities, no way it can improve, it's completely perfect, has every perfection, all powerful, and so forth. That's how we derive all those properties. So this is quite a good argument, and this is one that's, Aquinas developed from Aristotle. What's some problems with this argument?
With actual?
With this idea of something purely actual?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's never ending.
Yeah, so that's Aquinas' point. Aquinas' point is that it has to end somewhere, and so there must be something purely actual.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll say dust.
Pardon? Dust?
Yeah.
Yeah?
I think it ends at dust.
It ends in dust, or those symbols. So the critique of this argument that I've thought about is that it assumes act and potency are true properties of reality. All right, so Aquinas is saying this is what change is, and I think he's right. If change is the movement from act to potency, then there must be something purely actual, but maybe we can conceive of a different way of describing change. Okay? So here we have the three arguments, and then I've got the critiques there. So the Kalam assumes the universe has a finite past. The argument from motion assumes act and potency are true properties of reality. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. Aquinas and us will need to justify that and look into it. And then from contingency, it assumes the universe is contingent. All right? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Certainly feels like it is, certainly looks like it is, but perhaps it has to be this way. And then Hume's critique of fallacy of parts to wholes. Even with that critique though, it's a strong critique. And it just makes you think, surely, why would the universe be different if it's a physical thing? So he doesn't say it commits. He says maybe it commits the fallacy of parts to wholes. Okay. So all right, let's move on to what we're talking about today then. And what we're talking about today is I think we'll just do one. I've got two arguments here, but one of my favourite arguments for the existence of God, even though I've recently discovered I don't think it works. Okay, but it's still a really, really cool argument. So these are what we call evolutionary arguments against naturalism. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to take some of the beliefs of naturalism and we're going to perform what's called retorsion, or reductio ad absurdum. Okay, so that's the Latin. That means reducing something to its absurdity. So here's a great example of that. I love pizza. All pizza is delicious. I love all pizza. It's fantastic. Okay, let's reduce it to its absurdity. Oh yeah? Really? How about pizza that got run over by a tyre on the asphalt and is now crawling with ants, and that happened 6 months ago? Would you still like to eat it? All right, so we've reduced a statement to an absurd conclusion. That's called reductio ad absurdum. Yeah, have some input.
I'm just wondering what's the difference between that and a straw man? And a straw man.
A straw man.
Yeah.
So reductio ad absurdum is where you take a statement and then say it leads to an absurd conclusion.
Okay.
A straw man is where you construct a fake argument, or one that's really easy to break down.
Okay.
Yeah, good question. Okay, so what we're going to be doing here is that we're going to take some of the beliefs of naturalism and we're going to say what are the conclusions it leads to.
Oh, so you don't actually change the statements that they make. You just get a conclusion out of those statements. That's
right.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. And so this is a legitimate form of argumentation.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. That's why it would be done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and now in logic last year you would have done syllogisms. Okay, this is another form of deductive argument called a modus ponens, and it has a very basic form. Okay, this is a valid deductive argument. It says if P is true, then Q is true. Okay, that's premise 1. It's saying if P, then Q. Premise 2 says, but P is true. The conclusion, therefore, Q is true. I should fix this now. If my car has not petrol, where is it?
Has not petrol.
If my car has no petrol, then it will not start. Okay, we're not talking about electric cars. I wrote this before electric cars existed. So if my car has no petrol, started. If my car has no petrol, then it will not start. Okay, so that's the first premise. Okay. Then the second premise: my car has no petrol. Conclusion: therefore, it will not start. Okay, that's like a ridiculously simple argument, isn't it? You know, but it's useful because we can say: is premise 1 true? Is premise 2 true? This is the type of argument we're going to use today. And so it's by a guy called Richard Taylor. And this argument, I said, I've wrestled with for a number of years, right? And so yeah, he's a philosopher. He's not particularly well known, but he's also he's more famous as a beekeeper than as a philosopher, interestingly enough. And so this argument, like I read it in the book on metaphysics. So I think Aidan's got that one where he talks about God in there, and it's the first time I've sort of come across something like it. And I typed it up as a syllogism and made a bit of an argument, a simplified version of it, and posted it on YouTube. And I was having back and forths with lots of different people, sort of really building up a steel man of this argument. Yeah, so it was quite enjoyable, quite interesting. But anyway, let's get into it. Okay, so this is how the argument starts, and this is quite a tough argument, but I think you guys can get it. The reason I'm doing it with you and not the year 11s. So imagine you've just woken up on a train. Okay, so you sort of close your eyes, you open them, and you're on a train. And you've got absolutely no idea how you got on a train. But you look around, you see it's a train, you can hear the you can see the train tracks. No idea how you got there, no idea where you are, no idea what's going on. And you gaze out the window, and this is what you see. You see the rolling green hills, the beautiful blue sky, the clouds, and then written in massive boulders, not in font, like just text that I'm pasting at the top, in boulders that are embedded in the hillside. Big white boulders. It says, "Welcome to Wales." All right, where are you? In Wales, you would believe, right? It'd be rational to suppose this sign says welcome to Wales. Surely I'm in Wales, okay? However, you might be a bit of a skeptic. And you might suppose, actually, I reckon that sign was generated by asteroids falling from space. And they fell and embedded themselves into the hillside and just so happened to be arranged in the way that says welcome to Wales. I'm not really in Wales. That's just fallen from the sky and managed to put itself in that order. Okay, so let's suppose you're a skeptic and that's what you think happened, that asteroids fell from space and arranged themselves like this. Where are you? Don't know. Would it be rational to believe you're in Wales?
If you were rational.
If you believed that asteroids fell and arranged themselves like this, would it be rational to believe you're in Wales? No, it'd be absurd. You could be anywhere on planet Earth, right? So we've got this sort of natural explanation. If you believe it has a natural explanation, it seems absurd to believe it hasn't. It tells you the truth, or it has a purpose, all right? That this sign has a purpose. Similarly, you might believe there was some sheep in the field wandering along, and they just so happened to chew the grass in this sort of pattern that spelled out "Welcome to Wales." Okay. So if you believed the sheep put that sign in there, all right, where are you? Don't know, all right? If you believe the sheep put that sign in there, it's irrational to believe you're now entering Wales. Okay, so do we sort of understand that a bit?
Yeah.
Yep. Aiden, you got some critiques of it so far or not? Excellent. Okay. I've got another example, which is you're wandering through the forest, all right, you're off for a nice walk and you find a gravestone. Here lies John Smith, 1985 to 2016. Cause of death, too much moderation. Not sure, found it on the internet. Okay, now, any rational person would approach this and say, okay, John Smith got buried here. He died in 2016. He was born in 1985. All right, but maybe you're a real skeptic and you think, no, John, not true at all. I reckon there was some natural geological event that caused this piece of rock to just jut out of the earth, and then a pigeon came along and pecked because there was a worm there, and pecked that into the rock. Okay, so you could believe that happened. All right, and that's sort of a natural process. It'd be natural for those kinds of things. You can describe it in terms of geological events and animals participating in it. But if you believed that, it would be ridiculous to assume John Smith is buried there, right? Okay, yep.
Suppose I think that miraculously that will float. They're trying to explain to me that without anything underneath.
So, look, will it float?
Yeah. Are you saying that people can think that it can happen by a cause of miracles?
There are events, there are different ways of explaining things, okay?
Yeah.
So the two ways of explaining, I've only presented two. One of them is this gravestone was put there intentionally with a purpose, okay, of marking something. Another one is saying there was some natural process that took place, whatever it is, okay? The earthquake, the pigeon came along and pecked it.
Sure.
So I'm saying, either of those would explain its existence.
Yeah.
If you believe the second one, it's irrational to believe that John Smith is buried there. Okay, so here's what the argument says. I think here's what the argument's saying when we take those two pieces of evidence. Premise one, if some phenomena has a natural explanation, so welcome to Wales, the gravestone, then it is irrational to suppose it has a purpose. Okay? If you believe the welcome to Wales sign has a natural explanation, it's irrational to suppose it's put there intentionally with the purpose of welcoming you to Wales. If the gravestone says, here lies John Smith, and you believe it had a natural genesis, then it's irrational to believe that John Smith is buried. That's the first premise. Here's what Richard Taylor says. Our sense organs have a natural explanation. Okay? If we consider naturalism and the description of how naturalism generates human beings, all right? The naturalist scientific understanding of how human beings emerge is that we're all evolved ultimately from a single cell of bacteria, right? All living things are through the process of natural selection, all right? It says your sense organs are not designed, rather they are the product of a natural process. Okay, so if you smash those two together, therefore, it is irrational to suppose our sense organs have a purpose. All right?
One of the issues I have with this argument is that, and no one states that it have a natural explanation, but it feels like that it leaves out the fact that it could have any other possible explanation as well. We're assuming that it's, that it has, if it has a natural explanation, then that's the only explanation that can be defined there. Like, even if someone was to believe that, these rocks fell down specifically and it came down to welcome to Wales, right? Just because that has a natural explanation doesn't mean that they specifically need to believe that our sense organs having it. They might believe over a different explanation for why they are there than a natural one. So
Sure. Yeah,
we assume that they must believe, like, people have a congruent belief on every single thing. So I just disagree with the, some phenomena, taking that some phenomena has a natural explanation and then applying it throughout to everything else.
Very, very good. So what we're doing in this argument, remember I said it's reductio ad absurdum. So we're taking the core beliefs of naturalism. This one. That's what naturalism says. you're not designed with a purpose. You're not created. You just emerged out of this muck, you know, and that's how you come to exist. Like, I mean, I'm pretty sure you guys understand how natural selection works, right? But I'll just provide a very quick explanation, because it's a beautiful theory, natural selection. But it just says, like, we've got 3 mice, okay, and one of them's, they're all different speeds. Here's the fastest, here's the second fastest, here's the third fastest. All right, along comes a snake. All right, which one's going to survive? The fastest one. Okay, so this one survives. This one has babies. All right, and you have the same deal. All right, out of those 3 babies, the fastest one survives. And so, natural selection is the process of advantageous behaviours or traits being passed on to each generation, and that's how evolution occurs. If you think of your eye, you know, the way that the contemporary scientists say that it's developed is that there was an organism at some stage in evolutionary history that had a patch of skin that was sensitive to light, okay? And this sensibility to light gave it an advantage to survive over its siblings, over other members of its species. And as a result, it's the one that passed on its DNA, okay? And if you have that compounding over several generations, that's how you can, g'day guys, come on in, roll on in, grab a seat at the back quietly. That's how you can compound this complex thing and arrive at something so beautiful and complex. So, I might stop the video for a sec, and we'll just keep chatting about it.